Hi everyone. Welcome to another of our Care Visions family talks. And I've been enjoying them so much, as I say, on every single one, and I keep learning. I'm Linda de Caestecker. I'm a public health doctor, part of the Why Not Trust and the Care Visions team. And I'm delighted to introduce Sue to us today. Like me, she's also a parent as well. She's not yet a grandparent like me, but she is a parenting coach and parenting expert. And you may know her because she's often in the media, on TV, on the radio. She's got webinars, etc. So it's fantastic that she's agreed to come along as our guest today. So I'm just going to start by saying, Sue, would you tell us a bit about yourself, your background, how you've come to be an expert?
Gosh, no pressure. I was a former deputy head and class teacher for over 22 years. I taught all sorts of ages and all sorts of backgrounds. And my father died quickly, followed by my mother about 20 years ago. And I thought, do I want to teach the Vikings for another 20 years? And I thought, maybe not. And I loved teaching. I absolutely loved it. But, I'd been doing it for 20 odd years. I always wanted to be a journalist or a writer. And so I decided to then set up and retrain. So I trained with Paul McKenna in something called NLP. I joined the Life Coaching Academy and trained and got qualified in that. And then I was invited, which is I thought was a bit of fate, to write my first book, which was Raising Happy Children for Dummies, one in the black and yellow series. Yeah. And then that led to a bit of radio, and because I can chat. Then it led to telly, which I can chat on and answer sofas. That led to ITV This Morning, that led to BBC Radio, that led to LBC, and that's led for me being a consultant for Danone, and also writing and doing videos with Disney Family. So it's kind of been a real progression. And now I've taken a sort of another turn with the parenting to digital parenting, and it's about navigating the digital jungle. And I have a podcast, and I have resources and books, a new book out all around digital parenting and handling those smartphones and that social media and all of those sorts of worries that we have now with devices.
Yeah, we've talked about that in a few of our sessions, so we'll definitely recommend that to our audience. You're called a parenting expert. Does that mean you never made mistakes with your children? You did it all right?
Of course not. I remember talking to someone, I was a parent coach, and he said, well, no one's heard of a parent coach. What is a parenting coach? I mean, they've heard of maybe a business coach, and still people don't quite know the difference between a coach or a therapist or a counsellor. And so a coach takes you from where you are now to where you want to go. I ask good questions to help you find your own answers in a way, although when I wrote my first book, you can take your hat off and then offer some practical tips. And so now I do a LinkedIn newsletter, and I'm asked for thought leadership stuff. But basically, I try and make everything practical. So whatever the problem might be, what is it you need from me to help you navigate, whether it's a divorce or a separation or whatever it might be that you're going through, without finger pointing, no tut-tutting, just helping hand really is my intention, to help you be the best you can be, because children deserve you to be the best you can be. And as my dad said to me once when I was about 14, he said, but Sue, I've never done this before. And I thought he knew everything, and of course you don't when you go through it. And parenting challenges are much harder sometimes in ways now with all the devices and all the scary stuff on social media, so it's not easy.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer. Thank you. We're here particularly this afternoon to think about how we support our child or young person if you're going through separation or divorce. And I know you've written quite a lot about that. And one of the important things you talk about is how do you broach that subject with your child or young person? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, very important. I remember I have written the divorce journal for kids, which is for 7 to 13-year-olds. And it is a lot of parents come and say, well, how do I tell them? Because I remember working with a client, and she could remember she was wearing black patent shoes, an orange cardigan and a little tunic. And it was 50 years ago that her parents told her that they were separating and divorced. They hadn't really planned it properly, but who can sometimes, but she never forgot where she was and what happened. So a lot of the time I do a 1 hour session with a parent, and or two parents to look at when are you going to tell the children, where are you going to tell them, and how are you going to tell them, and what are you going to say? Because you don't know all the answers if this has just happened, but it is important to not do it in a child's bedroom just before they go to bed, or on a Sunday evening just before they go back to school. There are times when it would be better, and you preempt what you want to say, singing if you can from the same song sheet, not making promises you can't keep because that betrays trust, but explaining what may be happening in simple language. And I remember saying to you, I remember working with a client together, and they were looking at telling their 3-year-old, and they planned it and they thought about it and they'd written some bullet points, because it's good to do that because you get a bit emotional and you might get tearful. So it's good to have your notes ready to sort of just look down that. So they planned all this with the little 3-year-old, and the little 3-year-old's lip started to go because she said, "But who's going to look after me?" She thought they were both going. And of course, we hadn't considered that. And I hadn't either, because, you did it with good intention. And of course, another one, when you've got a 13-year-old, is going to be handled slightly differently too. And so you need to have the sort of messages that you want to say to them, and try and then, keep consistency with those messages as you go through. And you don't know always what the answers are. But I think if you're in a good place, certainly your children will be in a better place than if you haven't planned it at all, or you get angry, or you say the wrong things.
And often at a time like that, you're certainly not in a good place, particularly if you're the partner and one is leaving who wants to leave and you don't want them to leave. And that can be quite difficult because you're angry and you're bitter and you're upset.
Yeah. Yeah, all of those things, because I talk about the 7 stages of going through a divorce or a separation, and it's the same whether you're married or not. Your partner's changing, your life is changing. In fact, your life is falling apart. It happened to me. That's why I wrote about 153 articles, I remember, through the process, and then wrote a book about Suddenly Single, practical tips to help you navigate it. Because you're not in a necessarily good place. So again, don't offload on the kids, because sometimes if they're 12 or 13 and they look mature and they sound as if they get it, they're not able to handle that and hold that for you. And then another thing people do is go off to friends with a bottle of wine and slag off the ex. And there's a place for a bit of that, but don't do some of that in front of the children. They're not able to handle that. Also remembering that they are half, whoever you're slagging off or telling, saying, "Oh, my ex is this, that, and the other," that is their mum or their dad. And they either look like them, or they sound like them, or they're musical like them, or, all those things. They are half of them. And when you do calm down and come through the 7 stages that I talk about, you need to be able to do it with some sort of dignity and respect, and have handled it quite well for your children. So even just pausing to ponder some of the things you might say. I have this idea that you press a pause button like on a remote control, take a physical step back and take a breath. Because even that split second of doing that detaches you, and you start to think, is what I'm going to say kind or helpful, or what is it? And it's not helpful if it's just immature nonsense about someone. So it's not easy, but it's enormously important. So get the help that you do need. Sometimes you do need to go to a friend and offload, and that's fine. But if you find yourself not coping with it, not getting out of bed and angry all the time, or drinking too much, or smoking too much, or shopping too much, or whatever too much, it's a sign that you're not really quite handling that well. And that's where I come in sometimes. I've got a 6-week coaching program where we look, and on my website it tells you week 1, week 2. It's not linear like a broken arm. It's not going to just get better and we're going to follow this religiously, but it gives you a guidance of perhaps where you're going to go through and what you're going to feel and how to navigate it and come through it, because you do come through it. One of the stages, I say, is you do turn a corner and you do rise again. And in fact, I bought a phoenix ring to represent that bit for myself, because I recognized that I'd been in the lonely place, the depressed place, the sad place, the angry phase, all of these different things. But eventually you do come through, and it's healthy to come through that. And I'm not suggesting you get to the place of forgiveness or anything like that too quickly, if ever. But I had a client, I was on TV the other Friday talking to Vanessa Feltz about divorce, and this lady then sent me an email after to say, I've got 2 weddings and my 2 kids are getting married this year, and I've got to see my ex. I haven't seen him for 20 years and I'm still incandescently angry. Can you help me? Because that's not going to serve your children's wedding if they're tense and worried about you sitting at polar opposites in the hall or at the service. So you've got to try and get over some of these things. Sometimes it's not easy, but it is important.
And if it's good, if it's an amicable and you're both agreeing to work together on it, but
Sure.
if there's a bit, certainly at the start of animosity, but you've still got to co-parent your children, how do you help somebody to do that?
Well, that takes time and that takes intention, and it's having the intention actually when you've gone through some of the high emotions, because you are in your child's life forever. Things have changed. Family sort of ways of doing things have changed. It's the death of dreams, sometimes from mums and dads, but you can negotiate it well. You can keep communication going. And one of the things I suggest with parents I work with is put a photo of the children sometimes on the table when I'm working with them on a parenting plan. Who's seeing who on Tuesdays, who's buying the school shoes, who's going to pick them up on a Thursday, all of that practical stuff. And sometimes what you say or you suggest, whether it's amicable or not, but you come together to try and do it for the kids. You look at the photo, and I remember a client, he said something, and then I said, well, what do you think Ruby might think of that? And he looked at the photo and he went, oh God, no, we won't do that. Because it suddenly focused him. I didn't have to say anything. He just shifted as in, oh no, that's not great. And don't forget, over time, you heal from the anger or the hurt or whatever it might be, and you may move on and they move on maybe quicker than you or slower than you, because it's not an exact science. But remember, the children are watching you, listening to you, observing you, because you are a blueprint for love, whether you like it or notice it or not. And we fall out with friends and we handle that, and animosity and anger and disappointment and all of that. So that's worth bearing in mind too, because if you are very angry and, blaming men or blaming women or whatever it might be, you may be hindering your child's relationships later on when they're turning teens or when they're going into their adult life too. So I don't want to add to your burden if you're going through a separation or divorce, but do think about the longer term picture and do get the support that you might need, because it's not an easy journey, to be quite honest. It's 3 steps forward and sometimes 5 steps back. It's not like a broken arm that you sort out in 6 weeks and you're better. It can take as long as it takes.
Yeah. And if your child is acting out or being difficult or doesn't want to speak to you because they're very upset about this, how do you help them?
Well, again, back to the 7 stages that I talk about, because even your mother-in-law is going through disappointment or denial or hurt, and your children will be going through it actually too in different stages, and you may not all be on the same page on the emotion. And that's where the Divorce Journal for Kids comes in. It won an award actually because people said, oh, this is a great place for a child to work through the divorce for themselves. And it's very positive. It talks about all the positive things of being a family, and then it looks at other emotions. Kids can do it on their own, or they can do it with one of the parents, or it starts conversations so you can hear how everybody is feeling so that you can support them in the way that perhaps they need it at the phase that they're in. And it is difficult for the children, of course. I remember one child said, in the conversation we were working, well, why do I have to pack up my bag every Friday and move over to see my dad? Because there's all sorts of ways you can manage that. And it is very individual. You don't have to do it the same way as everyone else. But if you can keep out of court, one of the things I want to say is keep out of court if you can, because you are hemorrhaging away money because of your anger. And you can do things like mediation, or you can do it yourself if you can. If you can sit down and work out the finances and go forward like that, that's a much better way to do it for you and for everybody too. But not everyone is in that position or even in that place, and it depends on your circumstances, of course.
And there are charities, certainly in the area I'm in, of family mediation. You have to pay a small amount, but it's not It's not a large amount, and they're
Yes.
experts at helping you work through all
Yes.
that without, as you say, having to go to the adversarial place of
Oh, yeah.
what.
And there are actually apps once you are divorced. There's something called Amicable, there's something called My Family Wizard, where you can go in and put all the stuff like the school dates or have
Ah,
you read this report or what you're doing on Thursday, that sort of detaches you from WhatsApp and where it can get quickly crossed. So you're putting up all sorts of things on an app like those ones, which I recommend. I'm not paid by them or anything. Just found that I did a podcast on navigating the digital jungle for divorce, and I had Matthew Taylor from Stowe Family Law, giving an overview of some really wonderful advice about how to navigate that, not just purely from a legal point of view, but also we chatted and bounced around co-parenting as well. So it's really worth going to listen to
oh,
that. It
yes.
might
Well,
be
if you
helpful.
could give us the link, we can circulate that. That would be
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
Um, And how much choice should you give children in these co-parenting decisions? I don't want to go to dad's every weekend, or I want to spend Christmas and holidays with dad, and you've negotiated something different. How do you bring in the child's view to that?
That's a really great question. And that's part of why the Navigating the Digital Jungle podcast talks about that. So does the journal, as in, depends on the child's age, doesn't it, as
Yeah.
well? Because you feel guilty, right? You sometimes let them stay up too late. You let routines go. You say, oh, yes, you can eat more of that junk food. And that's not really what they need. They really need you to keep consistency and keep things going the same. That you've always had. Those routines are so important. But it is important as they get a little, because that was Becky in my class when she was 8. She said, but no one's listening to me, Mrs. Atkins. And I felt for her, and I thought, I'm sorry it's taken me 20 years to write the journal, because it is important sometimes, not always to go and do what they say, not from a place of guilt, but actually to hear what they have to say will help them go through the process and be part of it too. And certainly as children get older, they want to hang out with their friends more. 14-year-olds, it's not you or it's not dad or mum, it's just I want to hang out with my mates. So you have to be mindful of that too, and talk about it and listen. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And certainly with older children, hear what they're saying, try and be somewhat adaptable. And then, of course, it does work out with your co parent as well. If they're not being reasonable, it is a bit difficult, all of this navigating. But I think it's important that children do feel heard through the process too. And then, if it's sort of a sensible thing, you think it's appropriate, then you can change and adapt to what they want and their needs or what they're saying or asking. One of the good things about technology, actually, because I'm very pro tech, but I'm also protect them, is Zoom and WhatsApps. Because with teens, a quick WhatsApp chat or a quick text or whatever it is can mean you're connecting, but you're not necessarily there all the time. You know what teens are like. So you can use technology very much so for the benefit, if you want to as well, to stay connected with your kids.
Lee's asking in the chat, do kids sometimes act out different behaviours because of the divorce and separation? Are there typical ways that they might act out? And what do you do if the other parent... Yeah, this was a question I was going to ask. So it's 2 questions really. But the second one was, how do you manage it if one parenting style or way of parenting or some of the rules they have are very different from your own?
And it can be, because what often happens, and it doesn't have to be mum or dad, I just use it as an example. Mum might be eat your broccoli, brush your teeth, go to bed and do your homework with this, and perhaps the Disneyland dad, and I'm not knocking dads, of course not, but could be, oh no, you can eat popcorn and stay up 11, we're going to game and we're going to watch Netflix and it'll be marvellous when you come to stay with me. And that can be quite difficult to negotiate, that kind of thing. Kids, you're there to be your child's parent, not their friend. And because you feel somewhat guilty about what's happened, you sometimes give in to things that perhaps you shouldn't do. So keep the bigger picture. That I was talking to someone the other day. You get stuck in the socks and pants of life, but actually look at the bigger picture, what you're trying to create as a responsible, resilient, happy, confident adult. So just think about that when you're trying to navigate what they do at the other person's house. You can't control that, actually. And if they do stay up really late eating popcorn and doing stuff like that, but you're making them, go to bed and do their broccoli, they won't thank you there and then, but they actually know the difference and they learn over time to self-regulate themselves. And when they're grown up, they may well turn around and thank you for what you did. Well, they may not, because that's kids, but it's doing the right thing anyway. But letting go of what you can't control. Now, of course, if there's a duty of care, you need to step in and make sure that they are safe. But what we're talking about here, if it's sort of things like, well, they had an ice cream before they went to bed and we don't do that in our house. Is that really that important to fight over? Sometimes you have to learn to let some of it go over your head for your own well-being, or you'll do yourself a mischief.
Yeah. And the question of, are there typical behaviours that you sometimes see after divorce or while it's going
Yes.
on?
Well, some children go backwards a bit in terms of they were potty trained and they were night trained, at sleep, and they'll start having accidents in the bed, or they'll start sucking their thumb, or some children get very angry because they feel they didn't want this to happen and they're cross that their mum or their dad isn't living with them anymore and we don't see the other parent as much. And money is tight, there's not so much money and the cost of living crisis is still very much around. And so they have anger. So it's about sometimes holding that space, sometimes to just let children express their emotions, and then you can decide what you're going to do with them. And sometimes grades slip at school, of course, because kids are not concentrating so much. Or when I was teaching as well, sometimes they've been away with one of the parents, it's their weekend. They come to school tired on Monday morning, not ready to learn really. So that, these are difficult. They are difficult to navigate, but you can do it and you can make sure that your child is supported through it. But the point being is that balance between holding space, looking after them, nurturing them, but not necessarily doing stuff because you feel awful about what's happened. They do recover. Children are enormously resilient. They bounce back and they bounce well, and if you get it wrong, well, you've made a mistake. You've not done it before. Forgive yourself as well. And just then learn from that as you go forward.
Yeah, and you talked about the school. Should you tell the school when something like this is happening, and will they be
Oh, gosh,
supportive?
it's a major
Yeah.
life change.
Yeah.
Of course. And, you might feel that the carpet has been pulled or the rug has been pulled out from under you. So children are going to find that quite a shock too. And if you didn't know it was coming, some children are delighted because there was so much shouting and so much maybe violence or something going on in the home that they are relieved this has come to an end. So there's all sorts of mixed emotions because of the circumstances. And the difficulty for children also is if a parent starts to drink too much or, be playing out their own stuff, it's very difficult for a child to navigate some of that too. So yes, the school needs to know, and actually I train teachers in coping with children, because whether you're teaching geography, if you're in secondary, or you're teaching primary, you need to know about how to handle that. And there are some lovely books, and in the Sue Atkins book club I have lots of books around subjects of any topic, because I always think a book or a story is a good place to start, and there's some nice books in there about how to handle divorce and talking to kids about all sorts of aspects of divorce or co-parenting or blended families as well.
And you touched on this issue earlier, but there's a question about how do you support your children if one parent is saying really horrible things about you or and the other parent? How do you manage that?
Well, that is difficult and that's not very nice. And sometimes it's just not true.
Yeah.
So get the support you need to be mature about that. Not don't roll over and go, oh, well, that's it. It's terrible and it's true. But also don't join in and then start slagging off the parent either. You have to be mature about this. And that isn't easy. So find out where you personally can and kind of let off steam about that awful thing, and don't do it. I remember actually a personal friend of mine, she had 3 kids and they went through a divorce, and my friend Sarah never said a bad word about their father. And he wasn't a terrible man, but there were things she could have said, because one of them was, the kids was 7, 9 and 11, I think. And it was only when the son got to 18 and he was doing something and the father did something silly and, was kicking off about something. And he turned to her and he said something about the father. And because he was 18 and an adult now, she said, yep,
Yeah,
or
you've
something,
learnt.
and I always admired her because it wasn't that she, capitulated to it. She didn't want to join into that. But it's not easy if someone is saying stuff about you that's not true or not very nice. But do try, well, Michelle Obama says, when they go low, we go high. If you can rise above it or let off the steam where the children don't hear it, but certainly don't join in with it, slagging off the other person.
And it's probably better to know that's being said, isn't it? And at least you can talk to your children about it than if they're
And the other thing, Linda, is also don't do the interrogation when they come back from the other parent. Like, what's the girlfriend like? What did you eat? Where did you go? What happened then? Because they're like pawns in the middle of a chess game, and they don't know, kids, and they shouldn't be put in that position of you're e-wigging and what happened and how did it go and what's she like or what's he like and all of that stuff. Don't do that to your children. They don't understand that game, and it's not fair for them to be put in that position. So do try and rise above that one as well.
Yeah. And so if one parent or both parents meet new partners, they too might have children. And so the child is not just negotiating a different family life, but new family members.
Yes,
That must be hard for children.
it is. And I have the 2 sort of websites going actually about some of this topic. On my SueAtkins.com, thesueatkins.com, I have an article about cooking up a slow burning casserole, is my analogy. You can't put everyone in a blender and out they come happy families like the Brady Bunch. Oh, I'm so old, I remember the Brady Bunch. Or the Partridge Family. You can't do that necessarily. And on navigating the digital jungle, I've got resources just recently, actually, for a blended family about digital devices and about how to handle that with different family members and who's the one in discipline. Are you singing from the same song? Or you turn around and go, well, you're not my dad. You can't tell me, you're not my mum. Those sorts of remarks. It can be difficult, but it can be done. And the other thing is, take your time, be patient on building a relationship, perhaps with your partner's children. They don't have to call you daddy or mummy or love you immediately. They may grow to like you, they may grow to respect you, they may grow to find you a wonderful source of kindness or a listening ear or funny or someone who reads great books to them or stories. So take your time building the relationships, and it can feel 2 steps forward and 3 steps back depending on the circumstances too, because there's a reason you are separated or divorced, is that you didn't get on with that person and now you've got somebody else. But your children didn't decide that that's what they wanted to happen. They didn't necessarily want to share a bedroom now with this older kid that turns up at weekends, who is the other member of the family now. So be careful with that and nurture respect and nurture, listening to each other and letting it take its time. And it can be built nicely. And, there isn't one. I think this is an important one. I had a client fairly recently where, the father had separated and felt very guilty about it and was capitulating too easily and too quickly to the children's, shouting and needs. And the new partner felt she wasn't heard or actually included in raising the children. So you've got to blend that, remembering you are now creating a new kind of dynamic. And that can take a bit of time and it takes a bit of thought, but it's not impossible. I've got loads of clients that I've worked with now that over time it's a lovely thing to see.
Yeah, that's good. And in terms of, we've talked mainly about divorce, and you've mentioned, maybe the home life wasn't great before that with lots of arguments or whatever. But some people do a trial separation, which for a child, that's maybe confusing, or is it good that they're they're able to think, well, maybe mum and dad will get back together.
Children always think that, and
Yeah.
children always want that. They, even no matter how old they are, I worked with a 25-year-old who said, "Oh, I was kind of hoping they'd get back together." So a trial is what, really? It's really saying this isn't working. And it's the first step often towards a separation. So be mindful of what you say to the children. Be clear in your own mind what you're actually saying or what's actually happening in your family, because then the mixed messages. The key thing is trust, you see. So I often get people to draw a circle and put spokes in it, like on a bicycle, and write down what will stay the same. And it's usually like you might visit grandma on a Thursday and you will go dancing and you will play with Molly on a Thursday, the simple stuff. So that builds trust and they know what will stay the same. That's important. And then you may introduce what may change. And if you don't know, you can't say. But a trial, be clear about what that really means to you first, because then you can then trickle it down, both of you, to the children.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose often in a divorce, other things change too. You have to move house, you're not got as much money, or you might have to go back to work. And all of these
Yes.
things kind of add
Yes.
to the
Yes.
transition that children are having to cope with.
Yes. Oh, no, without a doubt. Transition is the key word, isn't it? You are going through change, and change is often painful. It doesn't have to be, but and also if there's a shock involved, you didn't know, you couldn't see, you don't know, and kids don't always privy to that. So yes, it is anything that takes time. So be gentle with yourself too. Self-care, and I talk a lot about, like on an aeroplane, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first, so that you're then able to help your child, because you can't do anything if you're flailing. So actually, it's not selfish to take care of yourself; it's self-care. And I think that's a very important thing. Often people are not so good at that. And because it is all a bit kind of traumatic for some people and quite difficult, they forget to take care of themselves. And that's really important.
That was actually one of the things we talked about in our last family talk, caring for yourself as a parent, just any
Yes.
parent, because
Yes.
it's such hard work, as you've said, very rewarding and enjoyable, but still hard work. What would be your tips for taking care of yourself in the situation of separation or divorce?
So think about what you enjoy doing, what nurtures your soul, if you like. Is it reading a book? Is it a trashy magazine? Is it watching a soap? Is it meeting friends? Is it learning to dance? I don't know what it is for you that you enjoy that makes you feel good. And don't forget then, when the children do go to the other parent, keep your own life going. Don't just do the ironing, and don't just drink a bottle of wine. Think what nurtures you, what helps you feel good and feel better. Is it exercise? Is it a Pilates class, going for a run? Whatever you find, but write it down, because often we keep it in our head and it swings into an idea and it swings out. If you keep a piece of paper by you and you jot down what things you like to help you feel better, and then as you notice, and keep a journal. I have the Suddenly Single journal where parents, write in it the journey, because actually it's cathartic sometimes to get it out. And you can, in it, because it's your private journey, you can rant, you can rave, you can say this, you can say that. And then you look back and go, gosh, in January I was saying that sort of stuff and feeling like that. And now here we are in April and I'm feeling a lot better and things have sort of changed. So it's important that you do keep your life going like that. And perhaps it's an opportunity. You won't see it always immediately, but it's been an opportunity to go back to your job that you did enjoy. It gives you a sense of self-esteem and you're competent and you're capable in whatever job you do. And so that's quite nice. You're meeting new people, you're getting out and about and making new friends. So it's about nurturing the old you with the old friends, and you may lose. I remember I went through a divorce and I remember losing just one friend who sort of not took sides but wasn't sure about it, and I was hurt a bit by that. But I'm saying it so that be prepared that some people do, you take sides. And also then sometimes it's a bit sad if you feel you got on very well with your mother-in-law or father-in-law. You may lose some contact there, but it's also important to remember the children. You may be divorced or separated, but the children like to see grandparents. And I've often had calls where grandparents say to me, "Oh my goodness, I don't see little Johnny anymore, and I just love him." And he used to come and stay with us 3 nights a week, and suddenly now we're not doing that. So think about how perhaps that can weave through some of your choices as well. Because love is love, isn't it? And it doesn't just end because you've separated or divorced. And your child may love to see their granddad sometimes. You don't have to make a song and dance of it, but negotiate it. It might be really important to them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And we've talked in other sessions about sometimes as teenagers, it's less easy to communicate. With one that was you've maybe seen the book, How to Get Your Teenager Out the Bedroom. And you've probably thought about this when you're looking at the digital issues that parents are dealing with. But if your child goes into themselves, or young person particularly, at this time of transition, what are some ways that you can draw them out and talk to them?
Well, you do it when they're ready, not when you're ready. And I often I remember, this has nothing to do with the divorce necessarily, but my son was, a teenager, and I was teaching at the time, and I went to bed with a good book and a hot chocolate drink, right, to relax. And he came in and he sat on the end of the bed and he sort of made a bit of small talk or something. And then I think he wanted to, I sensed he wants to talk to me. So I remember, it's funny, I took off my glasses and put down my book, and we chatted, and it was one of the best chats we'd had because he wanted to talk to me about something and I was ready to listen. So it's not when your children, when you want to talk to them, when they rush out of school sometimes. How was your school day? What did you do? What did you learn? But they might, when they're young, offload in the bath. You're bathing them and they're chatting. Or at bedtime when you're cozy and you're reading a story, or you're just saying goodnight to your teenager, or you're eating together. I always think eating together is a gentle way of just keeping an eye on your kids, having the conversations if they pop in, or having the intention perhaps to raise something that might be helpful to the family to talk through. So I think that's quite an important way of doing it too.
Yeah, yeah. You talked before about staying out of court if you possibly can. What if you're in a custody battle? I don't know if these things happen quite as you see them on TV, where you have to go to court for custody, but I know some people still have to do that. And you talked about people having to come to you from the court. How on earth do you help people going through that? That must be so difficult.
Yes, well, you have to look at ways to get grounded, get centered, and get clear, and have clarity and have confidence and know where you're trying to get to. Because it does feel like you're wading through treacle or mud or worse. And things do take a long time, and they're not quick, and they're not simple, and they're not easy, and they're not very nice. So what I often do as well is take people out to the future of where they are trying to get to. I remember doing it with a client about where she wanted to be, and she had this little cottage. It was only a small one. She said, "I know I haven't got, it'll be small, but it'll be mine, and it'll be quiet, and I'll have curtains," and and there's sort of then the path towards that. And that may take a few years. In the mind's eye, it may take 5 years to get there. I don't know. But it's knowing that you will get through it at some point. And what can you do to support yourself when it does get acrimonious and when it gets very personal and it gets very nasty, and and everyone is listening to the dirty linen or something. But know that that will end too, and you will survive it, and you will come out of it stronger, probably more resilient than ever, and you will move through it. So don't rush through it, but recognize you're not stuck there, because that can be a difficult time, and it can drag on for years sometimes with people if the other person is very, very unhelpful around wanting to divorce or get things moving. So also just manage it as best you can by self-care, knowing it won't last forever, and have the little, and even with a client of mine, I got her to draw a little picture, didn't matter what it looked like, of where she was going. And then we actually did a bit of a path, and she, she couldn't draw either, but it didn't matter. The stick people meant she was doing this, and then that was going to happen. And along that journey, what are you going to do? Oh, she said, I like swimming, so I'm going to go to the spa on a Saturday, in October, and I'm going to have a spa day, right? That kept her nurtured for the next step. So, and it may not be that, it could be anything that nurtures you, but keep yourself upbeat and keep yourself knowing that this is not the end. It will end.
I like what you've said around a few of these questions, that you're implying there's learning in this for us. It makes us more resilient. We can become stronger people. And I think that's often a good way of looking at dark times, isn't it? That actually you'll come out stronger and better for it.
You actually really will. You may not like the scars, but you will, you'll come through them. I also talk about doing the work. Don't then rush into another relationship and do it all over again with a different person. That's not learning. So doing the work, it sounds a bit hard going, but it's about learning about yourself and learning about what did you discover about yourself through that or that question or that experience. And therefore that is a kind of an open-minded approach to handling something that could be quite difficult. And then you will eventually, and I take people out when I'm trained in NLP, so I take people out to a different place, turn around, close their eyes, relax, do a bit of hypnosis stuff, and look back at how far they've come. Because that's a wonderful thing, to turn around and look back and think, and this is even when you're going through it, I came through that. And then you could actually sometimes plot some of the things that you plan to, will help you get there. And then it feels like, so the journey did end and I did get to here or whatever it was. And yeah, the kids are okay. I'm okay. We're okay.
And if you find yourself as a single parent, which is not where maybe you'd wanted to be, but that's where you've ended up, there's a lot more demands on you.
Yes.
And you've got to be willing to take help and support. Have you any advice for newly single parents and how they manage that?
Find a support group. Online, there's lots of places like that where you can hang out. Don't join the angry party or the pity party. That's not going to serve you. It might serve you for a little while and then go, actually, I think I've had enough of this sort of pity and self stuff. But do get support, because you're not the only person going through it. And also meet in real life. I'm a great believer now. Get off the devices if you can. Go to Meetup. I was advocating, it's called meetup.com, I think. And they have all sorts of things there for mums and dads with children, send, for single parents, etc. So you make, or gently make, some new friends that are in similar situations. And then sometimes you go, God, well, my situation isn't as bad as theirs. And I don't mean it facetiously. It is just to notice that sometimes you go, gosh, mine isn't as bad as that, or, whatever. And also then you forge new friendships. So you go off out to the cinema with a new friend and you didn't realise she liked the same sort of films. You never met her before. She's living locally to you. You do shares with your kids, maybe, have my kids on a Thursday for a couple of hours while I nip to the supermarket or whatever I'm doing, and you share and take care of the kids together almost sometimes. Those are new things that you hadn't considered that might be quite helpful.
Yeah. I had 4 children. I remember I could often take other people's 2 children. Seldom would they take all 4 of mine, but we would combine activities, which was often a really, really good thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lee's just saying I had a situation where the father only wanted sporadic contact and the children found this hard. So that's something we haven't touched on. What if one parent is absending a bit?
Yes.
Much as I tried to get a routine, it never happened. So what's your advice?
I did write an article about that actually for a single website about that sort of thing. You have to handle that disappointment, and that it doesn't sound very nice for your kids. but help them manage it and ask them how that would help, because it can be very hurtful to them, can't it, that the parent doesn't want to see them, or they're off doing other things that seem to be more important than them. So fill them up and nurture their self-esteem in all sorts of other areas, so that they are strong enough perhaps to handle that. And again, talk to them about it. It's not easy, that one. That's quite hurtful for everybody. And when also parents say one parent says they're going to come and they don't turn up. I mean, that's another horrible one, where you feel so depressed around the disappointment for a child. But certainly allow the child to talk it through. So you hold the space. You can't fix it, but hold the space for it. And then if you do get an opportunity to sort of speak to your ex, what way can we navigate this so you can be more reliable, and perhaps, less contact, but when you say you're going to, make sure it happens, to try and help the child through that sort of phase without feeling abandoned, I guess.
I know that if there is a time when you think you're going to see your father or your mother and they keep cancelling, that must be very hard for the child.
Oh, it's hard to watch that, isn't it, for anybody, the unreliability of somebody. And so therefore you could, if you wanted to, over time, talk about what it means to be reliable. So your child grows up a reliable person, because their father or mother is not reliable. So use the sad experience and the difficult challenge to then help your child be not that.
And Deirdre Singh, is there any specific advice for helping a young adult who is torn between parents and they're maybe still not at all getting on, and the young adult feels torn between them?
That's very awkward and very difficult. So get some support for yourself as well as a young person. Go and talk to someone about that, a counsellor at school or somebody, because you shouldn't be in the middle, and it's not fair that you are in the middle. So sort of take yourself out of the middle, if you like, because this is where the two parents need to sort this out, and it's not fair that you're having to be in that position. So don't step into taking on the responsibility to keep your mother happy or your father happy, because you'll never make them all happy. Try and be neutral. Don't stir the fire and sort of throw in a firework and walk back and let it go. But on the other hand, don't feel the it's not for you, even as a young adult, to take the responsibility of something. I was very mindful when I went through my divorce. My kids were older. They were at university and stuff. And I didn't want them coming home every weekend feeling sorry for me and thinking I wasn't coping. I made sure that they kept their lives going, and I didn't put them in the centre of awkward moments. But then I was trying to be mindful about it. But certainly if you are the child in the middle of that, try and find a better way for you to slightly detach and let the grown-ups, the adults in the room, really try and sorting that out themselves. So nurture your well-being and your self-esteem, and make sure that you don't shoulder that burden. That's not yours to shoulder. Give it back symbolically. Give it back to your dad, give it back to your mum, so that you make sure that, and of course the lessons you learn from that is how to be perhaps a better parent. There's learning in everything,
And for us as parents, not to make our child feel guilty if they are going to the other parent, or
no, because as I said to you,
do that.
You are half of them. Your character, your personality, maybe your interests, all of that. And that, because it doesn't mean because they like football and they like music or they like art or something, that they can't also like what you like, which is probably soaps and all sorts. I don't know. Look for the celebration in that, well, we are all a mixture of each other, really, and that you don't have to choose between one or the other. You are a mixture of both.
We're sort of coming to the end of our time, and it's passed so quickly because you're so good at communicating, Sue. But are there other areas or issues that we haven't touched on that you think maybe we should have, or that you'd like to say anything about?
Well, I think it's been very comprehensive. I do hope it's been helpful. I mean, can only say a little bit about it, but do check out my website for all sorts of articles around this, about the 7 stages you go through, and the 3 big questions often that children like. They didn't choose it, they don't know how to cope with it, and all of that. So there's loads of free resources in my blogs on that, on the Sue Atkins .com. And then if you're interested in handling digital parenting and co-parenting and all that and divorce, check out Navigating the Digital Jungle website, but also Navigating the Digital Jungle with Sue Atkins and Friends, which is my podcast, which is anywhere and everywhere on all the platforms that you might find helpful, whether you've got divorce, separation, or just kids generally. I'm there. It's a good listen while you're out and about, maybe, and you can get some ideas and tips. I try very hard to be practical and full of real tips and real scripts of what to say and how to say it and when to say it, because it's all very well being sort of academic about it, but you've got to be the one that's actually got to start that conversation or introduce that difficult topic to your children, regardless of their age. And there's another one on the blog about ages and stages, and I can send you the links to a couple of these
That'd be
ones.
great.
The 7 stages you go through, and then the ages and stages of what children will go through and what they're able to cope with as they grow up and go through that process.
And I know we're not here talking about digital experience, but you've written so much about it. Are you positive that we can find our way through this? Because there's been a lot of discussion in these sessions about how difficult it is, and it's a whole different world for our young people than when we were growing up. But it's still a wonderful resource that we didn't have. So what's your balance of view on how useful it will be?
Balance and boundaries, and a magic word called yet. You never say, no, you can't have a smartphone. You say, not yet, and social media, perhaps not yet. And when you talk to kids, don't say privacy settings because don't say parental controls because teens go, oh, parental controls, I'm out of here. So you say privacy settings and let's do it together. And we can navigate the digital jungle, but we do have to keep them safe, and we can't put our head in the sand around the dark web and sextortion and porn and gaming and all the different things that happen online. But you can manage it. So you can, with some of my tips and some of the stuff I've written in my newsletters and all the rest of it, give you just one idea and you think, oh, I can do that. And you don't get overwhelmed, because I think it is exciting time. Be curious, don't be judgmental. And every generation says, well, we didn't have telly when I was growing up. We didn't have radio when I was growing up. It is a big, fast world, and it does change quite quickly. I understand that, but keep up and be curious, and then I think you'll all be okay.
So Ben's put the link to your website in the chat for people, but also just before we came on air, we were talking about some of your work on school readiness, and that might be a really good topic for you to come back and talk to us about, because it's becoming more pressing.
Yes, I would love to do that, to be honest. As we said before we came on air here, school readiness is a big topic, and what that means, and it's not tutting and judging, but it's getting kids ready to hit the ground running. Because as I said, I taught 35 4-year-olds back in the day, and getting them ready to use a knife and fork and go to the toilet and hang their coat up on the right peg and make a friend and not snatch. These are very simple things that we can do, and helping children with their social skills as well, how to make friends and stuff when they start school. Very, very important. So I'd be happy to join you on school readiness another day.
Obviously, divorce and separation is an issue that we hope people don't have to go through, but it's so common. It can often be a positive thing, and it's accepting that, moving on and helping our children cope with it. And you've given us a lot of tips and advice on how to do that, both for ourselves as parents, but mainly how to help our children go through that huge transition. But it's been enormously useful, Sue, to hear you talking, and I'm going to look more at your resources. I had a look before I met you, but I'm even more enthusiastic to look at them now. So thanks so much.
My pleasure. Lovely to talk with you. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Hope you found it helpful.
Yeah, thank you.